Hello, this is Stephen Nojiri, and this is another Tada Genji tradition video. In this video, we're going to take a brief look at the symbolic and spiritual meanings of the Big Dipper in the samurai tradition, the particular emphasis being on the Tada Genji tradition and the overall Jingunden and Oboshiden tradition. This video will not exhaust all possible symbolic meanings, but should serve as a good platform for viewers to continue their investigation into the topic if they feel so inclined. Star magic and star rituals have a significant place in samurai tradition, and they are definitely found throughout the Genji tradition. These types of rituals and the meanings of the rituals go back thousands of years. They can be found in mainland Asia back into the BC times. However, this video will not touch on those details. It's too long and too complex for this video, but the viewer is of course encouraged to pursue further investigation if interested. For this video, we will briefly survey the following. We will look at the Big Dipper stars. We will contrast it with the planet stars, or in the video that talked about the war curtains, you were presented one war curtain that talked about planets and one war curtain that talked about the Big Dipper. And they use the kanji for star in many times, even when they're not talking about an actual star. So remember, star can mean star, but it can also mean any kind of heavenly thing, something in the night sky. So the Big Dippers, the planets. We will look at some examples, we will briefly review the symbolic meanings, and then we'll also take a brief look at the 28 constellations, and those will be touched on in a future video. The Big Dipper is a complex topic, so let's break it down into smaller summarized parts. The Big Dipper is the constellation related to protection of the emperor, but this is because it is related to the protection of life in general. The magic associated with this constellation is related to extending the length of life and removing the causes and conditions for the expiration of one's life force. In Taoism, it's explained as, quote unquote, erasing your name from the records of the dead and writing your name back into the book of the living. In Buddhism, it's explained as, quote unquote, reversing the causes and conditions of death and lengthening the life force. While we see it often associated with such deities as Warahi and Marisi, it also becomes, due to this life force aspect, associated with other deities such as Yakushi Nyorai, the medicine Buddha. For Taoism, there are many rituals related to interacting with the Big Dipper in order to extend life force and avert death. And this is partially what led to this practice to become used to protect the emperor. Or I should say, in old China, this is pretty much one of the main reasons that the Big Dipper became associated with the imperial palace or the emperor, for the protection or the extension of the emperor's life. We see the same pattern take place in Japan. When the Big Dipper rituals were imported, they had already been connected to defending the emperor by protecting life force. However, when they came to Japan, rather than being a Taoist thing, which was what it was more in China, by the time it came to Japan, the Big Dipper rituals came as Taoism and Buddhism, because Buddhism had its own Big Dipper rituals at this time. Or it wasn't just Taoist rituals, it was Taoist rituals, Buddhist rituals, rituals that seemed to mix Buddhism and Taoism. That's what came to Japan. So let's look at the Buddhist aspects a little further, as we are focusing on the Tada Genji and the Jingunden. This will have a more Buddhist slant. We were going to move away from the Taoism mostly, and this will have more of a Buddhist vibe to it. Now let's start. You'll see on the slide where I say Myoken Bodhisattva. Myoken Bodhisattva is the Bodhisattva associated with the Big Dipper. Lots of symbolism and ritualism. Too much to go into this video. However, let me say, Myoken Bodhisattva is associated with the Big Dipper, but Myoken Bodhisattva arguably is actually the deity of the pole star, of the actual North Star. And there is an association with the Dipper because of its association with the pole star, with the northern star. So arguably Myoken is actually the deity of the North Star, not exactly the Dipper, but over time, because of the relationship between the Dipper and the pole star, Myoken Bodhisattva becomes associated with both of them. Let's also look at medicine Buddha, Yakushi Nyorai. There is a sutra that explains the relationship between each of the 7 stars of the Dipper and the 7 Yakushi deities, or the 7 medicine Buddhas. This sutra is very astrological. It talks about birth, time associated to a star. Each star has a design, a sacred design, or that can be turned into an amulet that you can wear for protection. There are mantras, dharani, for each of the different stars. And there's a general explanation that if you practice the ritual practices of Yakushi Nyorai, you will reverse the causes of death. Also, Marishi, or water he, these are 2 female deities. They're very similar. They are both essentially the wild boar mother, and they are said to be associated with the Big Dipper as well. When we see this protection aspect, the protection of the emperor aspect manifesting as these 2 goddesses, particularly Marishi in Japan, become protection deities for the samurai. So if you take a look at your screen, you'll see a listing of the stars. Donoro is actually it should be Donoro. There's a little bit of typo there, but the kanji is correct. There's a typo in the English. Sorry about that. I just realized it on the slide, but at this point the video is being made. However, the kanji is correct, and the accompanying English is correct on most of them except for that one typo for the first one. But the name of these deities stay the same for Buddhism and Taoism. What really is different is how the deities are viewed and the details of the rituals associated with them. But the first deity is the first star, and as you go through, you'll see there are 7 stars where there are 7 deities. And I should point out that the final deity on there, the Hagun, that star deity is actually of particular divination importance, because the name Hagun literally means to rip or to rend the army. And so samurai, when it comes to divination, the location of that star plays into in the Obo Shiden and non-Obo Shiden, just samurai in general, tend to pay attention to that star and where it's at and what sort of divination comes from that particular star. So the deity list, if you wanted to take that deity list and go back to the second war curtain video, you would see the location of which of the Monomi viewing holes are named after which of those Big Dipper deities. So I would encourage you to do that. However, moving on, we can say that there are many deities associated with these 7 stars depending on Buddhism or Taoism. So you have those main stars, and then but those are the stars. But then the question is which deities are associated with those stars. And that there's a lot of different sort of views based on Taoism and Buddhism. The Taoist aspects of the Big Dipper rites absolutely did survive in Japan, so let's mention that. And this was due to the Omyodo Bureau. Basically, the imperial government of Japan had a bureau of yin and yang, of Taoism. And that is where the Taoist aspects of Big Dipper rites survived. The Genji tradition does seem more influenced by the Buddhist aspects, which the Buddhist aspects would have survived in the temples and monasteries, things like that, the Buddhist temples. So the Taoism is coming mostly from the government, the bureau, the Omyodo Bureau, and the Buddhism would be coming from temples. And it's the Genji tradition is more influenced, seems to be more influenced by the Buddhist aspects. Such things as the ritual of the Big Dipper and the Buddhist deities associated with those previously shown stars. But, to be clear, both Buddhist and Taoist aspects do survive in the Genji tradition, which is reflective of the fact of Buddhist and Taoist traditions of the Big Dipper have always been hard to separate, as they've always seemed to travel together since ancient times. Now in the war curtain video, in which we showed the esoteric curtain with the Dipper stars, we also showed the lesser esoteric, or the more exoteric version that had the planets. And if you haven't watched that video, it's the camping follow-up video, and it has pictures of the war curtains with each of the viewing holes has the name of the star. So let's now take a look at the 9 planets, because that was on the first set of war curtains we showed. In this setup is not really talking about stars. This setup is talking about the Sun, the Moon, Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter. So these planets, but it also involves Rahu Ketu. So these 9 are based on star knowledge from India. And in particular, the 2 stars, or the 2 planetary bodies, or the 2 planets, however you wish to translate that, are Rahu and Ketu. And those are related to eclipses. So there's an old story from India basically where a Ashura snuck into a ceremony where these planets were being deified and turned immortal, and this Ashura was, snuck into the ceremony and basically got made immortal and sort of like snuck in to being sort of a heavenly divinity, a star, an astrological body. But this led to a conflict between these deities and this Ashura, and basically it's a giant snake deity that swallows the sun, and thus the eclipse. And this deity was actually cut in half, but can't die. So the head portion is called Rahu, and the tail portion is called Ketu. And the Rahu is the sun swallower's head, and Ketu is the tail, as I said. But these are related to the moon's orbit. They're not seen as physical objects in the sky, but more pockets of energy. So Rahu and Ketu are invisible. They're not a mass in the sky. They're an energy in the sky. So it's it's the head and the tail of the Ashura, 2 energy points that are on the moon's orbit, and so it's and so they are related to the 9 planets in that these 9 astrological bodies are related to like astrological predictions. So when doing these astrological predictions, you have to consider Rahu and Ketu into the equation. So as I mentioned, the 9 planets are related to astrology: good luck, bad luck, birthday time, influences of planets during the times of years. This planet is in this part of the sky, Ketu is here, oh, this planet is near Rahu, things like that, creating literally like astrological charts. The 7 Dipper stars, however, are not related to like good luck, bad luck, but they are esoteric ritual magic related to clearing away the obstacles to life and prolonging one's life force. So the 9 planets are good luck, bad luck, astrology, and the Big Dipper is protecting life force. And the Big Dipper also is very much related to protecting the imperial court, the life force of the imperial court. So, and you can tell this is why the Big Dipper pattern becomes more advanced, is the more esoteric pattern, and why when we are looking at the war curtains we see it as a more advanced form of the war curtain, and why it's favored in the Genji tradition. And this is also why in the Oboshiden, when we say the Oboshiden is broken between, the big star, the medium star, and the little star, the big star is the sun, is the emperor, the medium star is the general, and the small star is the dipper. That the small star is the army or the samurai, the warriors, because this is related to the protection aspect. So now let us touch very briefly, very surface level, on the more esoteric, deeper aspects about the teachings of the stars. In Buddhism, and in the Jingunden and the Oboshiden, there is a teaching that the stars are not really external things. The stars are really external displays of internal energies. That is, that in esoteric Buddhism and in the Jingunden and Oboshiden, it is taught that the human body is a mandala, a sacred diagram, a sacred map of reality itself. And we discussed this in previous videos. So in this discussion, the samurai's head is the God realm. The samurai's head is Devaloka. The stars are energy patterns, deities located in the heavens, the God realm, which would be the head. Thus, the rituals of the stars are more about interacting with the internal energies of the head, less than about the external stars in the sky. This same understanding carries over to the 28 constellations, also known as the 28 lunar mansions. While there is a complete science and teaching of tracking these stars and the positions of the sun and moon in relation to these constellations externally, this is all about the external sun, moon, and stars in the sky. There are also deeper, more esoteric levels found within Buddhism and the Jingunden teachings, the Oboshiden teachings. Various esoteric mandalas exist with layouts of the star deities and the star energies. The 28 lunar mansions are usually understood to be 28 energies that exist on the outer ring of the mandala. That is, a ring with 28 deity energies in the brain, or in the head and in the brain. We find this in the samurai teachings within the Jingunden and the Oboshiden, but we also find this teaching in esoteric Buddhist teachings of China, Japan, India, Tibet, etc., etc., etc. So as we close this up, we can see that there exist two main purposes for star rituals. The external purpose, which is protect the emperor, chart good luck, chart bad luck, chart timing of events. But we also see an internal purpose, which is protecting one's life force, extending one's life force, removing obstacles to one's life force. And also the esoteric purposes, such as, like I was talking about, the internal energies, stars being deities of one's own mandala, and not necessarily anything to do particularly with the stars outside in the sky. So thus, when we're discussing star magic and rituals within the Jingunden and the Oboshiden, like the Tada Genji tradition, we must understand that there are these two purposes. It also helps us better to understand the more profound aspects of the teachings overall, meaning the sort of the normal explanation, stars in the sky, and then the more esoteric explanation, like energies of the body, and understanding that within these teachings there is like the outer level and then a deeper inner level. It makes the understanding of the things that are come up in the Jingunden teachings. Once you know that there's two levels, it will make it much more clear and easier to understand. And that is it for this video. As always, these videos are meant to be brief, and they are meant to inspire you or to give you a starting off point. The material in this video is copywritten by me, so please do not steal this material. Please do not take it. Please do not copy it. Again, I hope it inspires you. I hope that it sets you off on your own investigations and explorations, but please be respectful.